Welcome, everyone. My name is Darcy Purcell, and I am thrilled to have Candace Lawrence here today to be talking about the cooking for our third chakra. And also, as a leaky gut expert, I know we're going to dive a bit into leaky gut as well, since she deals with this with her clients every single day. So welcome, Candace.
Thanks, Darcy. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I wish I was actually there so I could be eating the food that you're making, but that is not going to happen today. So yeah, what are we making? Just take it away.
Okay. Well, this is a recipe to open up and balance our solar plexus chakra. Now, if you're not aware of where the solar plexus is, it's above the belly button. They say 6 inches, but we in Chinese medicine, if you take your hand and rest the bottom of your pinky finger up, right at your belly button, right up there is about where we're talking about. And so you can envision you have this beautiful circle, yellow circle of energy that's rotating in that area. And so when you think about the solar plexus chakra, think of it, they call it the city of jewels. And I just think that's such a great name for it, because this is also called our dantian, or our center, our power center. This, when you say, oh, I feel this in my gut, or any of those kinds of reactions, or this just doesn't feel good to me. So this is a really, really, really special area of the body. Now, the other wonderful thing about it is it's about our self-confidence and our self-worth and our self-esteem. So if your tummy, the gut, if the gut and your stomach isn't feeling good, and you walk around and you're bloated, and you're just kind of have lethargy in this area, you know that you need to balance that chakra. And today we're going to talk about how to balance it with a really delicious dish that I'm going to create, that you can use this for several days. That's what's so incredible about this one. And the reason that I love it is because it's got a prebiotic in it, which is one of those foods that actually feeds our probiotics, because our probiotics are in there doing their magic in your small intestine. And so the prebiotics help your probiotics to live. And so I think that's just really one of those great factoids that when you heard it the first time, then you start to go, oh, do I have enough prebiotics to feed my probiotics? And another way that I talk about it is our small intestine is about 24 feet long. It's a tube about 24 feet long. And so envision that there's little villages along the way. And up towards the north end, there's more lactobacillus probiotics and at the villages, and at the south end there's more bifidobacteria villages. And so each one of these villages likes different foods, even different colors. That's why eating the rainbow, and one day if you eat orange carrots every day, maybe you can change it up. You've seen the purple carrots now. It's the same food, but it's just the color, and your body goes, what? And your little villages go, hooray. And so it's really important, because I run into my patients every single day, and they have one thing that they eat for breakfast, one thing that they eat for lunch, and one thing that they eat for dinner. Seriously, for days on end. And so think of your little villages, and they're going, ho hum, I don't have enough to eat. So we're going to make today this great salad, which is called my camera person is distracting me. So today we're going to make a butternut squash because you can say, wait, butternut squash is orange. Well, it really isn't. I'm pushing it into the yellow category because it's such a great fiber and it's full of vitamin A. So this is a butternut squash quinoa salad. And we're going to put some asparagus in it, which I already mentioned is our prebiotic. Now, I have pre-made a lot of the things that go into this salad, and I'm going to say this. Yes, there is some prep to this salad. However, you are worth it. I'm talking about making your own food as a love language. And so you say, I love myself enough to cook my own asparagus. I love myself, even if you bought frozen cooked quinoa, great. I love myself. And when you look at one of these in the grocery store, you go, I don't know if I'm going to tackle that. But then you start cutting into it and you get these beautiful roasted orbs of butternut squash. And you say, yep, it was worth it. I love myself that much. So let's get going. Everybody should have a very, very sharp knife. That's one of the criteria for your cooking utensils. And if that's the case, then this end of the butternut squash comes off fairly easily. And then what I do, I kind of cheat a little bit and I cut off right above. This is called the bulb, and I cut right above it because this is got seeds inside it, and we can use those for another meal. That can go into soup. But so what I'm going to do is I made rings, and then I peel the rings, and then I chop it into chunks, and we roasted it. So I'm going to put this down. We're all set. Now, I don't usually use my big mixing bowl because it makes a lot of noise, but we're going to be putting a lot of things in here that we need to be able to stir up. So the first thing that it talks about in the recipe is we're going to use our 4 tablespoons of lemon juice. And you go, well, that's quite a bit of lemon juice. Yes, but when you think
Candace,
about
can I pause you for a second?
Sure.
Because nobody has the recipe in front of them. So I want you to talk for a second about the squash and I'm sorry, what is that you just roasted? Was it squash?
I roasted butternut squash.
How long? Just the basics. And then we will be providing the recipe when we send out the replay to everyone.
So what I was actually going to leave this on the cookie sheet so everyone could see it. But what I do is I cut this into bite-sized chunks, about that size, and I drizzle a little olive oil and salt onto it. Make sure I stir it up on the cookie sheet, make it into one row so that everything browns evenly. And then it's going to go in a 425-degree oven. So in the recipe, I have put in cook for 25 minutes. But what I want you to do, because all ovens vary so much, is that you want to peek underneath them and see if there's some little browning happening like this. If there isn't browning happening like this, put it in for a couple more minutes. Maybe put it in for 5 minutes, take a peek, and then maybe 10 minutes. So it just depends on your oven. When your butternut squash is cooked, you can bring it out and cool it. So here's our butternut squash that's going to go into our final recipe. I have also pre-made my quinoa. Now, quinoa in and of itself is a seed. It is not a grain, because a lot of people have been avoiding quinoa because they said, oh, it's a grain. And okay, we can talk about keto and paleo and everything else, but quinoa is an excellent source of a complete protein. It's got some fiber, it's got some nutrients in it. This is a win-win-win. This is like eating a steak, but it is all the complete amino acids, so it is good for you. So I've cooked my quinoa. Now, here is a cooking tip that you will thank me for years to come. I am not making a plug for this company, but I want you to see that I have dropped $1 extra for the bag, and I have gotten washed and rinsed quinoa. And so what does that mean? If you buy quinoa that's not washed and rinsed, that means that you're supposed to like put it in a colander with a very thin mesh and rinse it. And then you're going to rinse it again. And then you're going to rinse it again. Because people that say, oh, I don't like quinoa, it's usually because they just started cooking with it and they didn't rinse off basically the grain dust from it, or the seed dust from it. And it can have like a really earthy flavor to it. So buy the washed. Now we've got our quinoa. The next thing that I steamed ahead of time and I cut up was my beautiful asparagus. And you remember what I've said, asparagus is a great prebiotic, but it is also one of those vegetables that a lot of people, if they even say they don't like vegetables, it's green and it tastes pretty good. So it's one of those things you can kind of slide into a salad that people will say, oh, that's pretty good, even if they don't like vegetables. Now, I'm going to use my big bowl just because we put our 4 tablespoons of lemon juice in here. Now, here's the great cooking trick of the century, is the next thing you put in is your salt. And if you're trying to cut down on your salt, use a teaspoon. I think it calls for a teaspoon in the recipe. I like to use a little bit more. You can salt it at the beginning or the end. But what we're going to do is I pour the salt right into the lemon juice, and we're going to melt the salt before we put the olive oil in. So we just stir it for a couple seconds, and the salt miraculously disappears into the lemon juice. Now, this next part makes a little bit of noise, and I apologize because I usually don't use my metal bowl, but what I'm going to do is I drizzle in my olive oil, 4 tablespoons of olive oil. So it's in equal parts lemon juice to olive oil. So you see, I'm whisking pretty fast. And what I'm doing, there's a great word, and it's called emulsify. And so the lemon juice and the olive oil, you see it turned into kind of a creamy mixture. Isn't that neat? Now, the next thing, then everything is, and this is the magic part, then everything just goes together. So I'm going to put the quinoa into the lemon mixture so that it starts to soak up all that good lemon, olive oil, salt. So we put that in, give it a couple stirs, and you can see now that the lemon juice and the olive oil has soaked right in to that quinoa. And that's okay, because then when we mix in the other ingredients, they're going to take some out of the quinoa. They share. The quinoa is nice, it shares. The next thing I put in is my asparagus and our yummy little butternut squash, which is the idea behind this whole recipe, is for the solar plexus chakra and the yellow and the beautifulness of the city of jewels. So you could almost think of the green for one of the jewels of being the jade or the emeralds, and the butternut squash being the gold. And so I'm doing this great, just a brief mix. And then I have also, to give it a little bit of a crunch, I have toasted some walnuts, and we're going to mix in those walnuts. Now, if you're already kind of thinking about, well, wait, I could use pine nuts. Yes, you could. I could use pecans, and rather than butternut squash, I could use sweet potato chunks. That would be really nice for the fall. Sweet potatoes and pecans, lovely. Instead of the asparagus, you could steam broccoli. So you could change this whole recipe, but underneath it, you still have baked vegetable and quinoa lemon vinaigrette salad. So we're going to stir. Now look at this. I know you can't be here to smell this wonderful flavor, but it just smells like lemon and the little olive oil, and the butternut squash has been roasted and it's so happy, and so is that asparagus, and everybody is just like singing. All the flavors are just singing. Now, there's one thing that I didn't get out, and I love lemon zest. It just makes everything pop. Lemon all by itself, that flavor makes all the other flavors pop and makes them a little bit more vibrant. And so I have the zest of one lemon. Now, if you don't have a zester, there's usually one on, if you have a grater, there's usually one side of it that can be a zester. But if you don't have it, that's okay. This is still going to taste unbelievably good. But I'm going to mix in my lemon zest because I have some hungry people I'm going to be feeding here pretty soon. So we mix in our lemon zest and we're ready to go. So we have our asparagus, roasted butternut squash, quinoa, lemon. Oh, and the roasted pecans or excuse me, the roasted walnuts are in here. This smells fabulous. So you can do this a couple different ways. I could put some, what I like to do in some instances is I put a little arugula underneath it. Now, arugula is not a lettuce. It is actually part of the cabbage family or the cruciferous vegetables. So again, extra nutrients, extra fiber, and that's what this is all about. Fiber and prebiotics and probiotics and protein, and it's all here in this magic salad. Now, look how much I made. This is quite a bit. You can, if you're cooking for one, you can cut this recipe in half very easily, but then you still are going to have enough of this salad for today and tomorrow. And then I've eaten it for breakfast. I think it's just incredible. So I'm going to put a little into, just so that you can see what this looks like. Because at the bottom of the recipe, I talked about an additional little add-in or add-on is some feta cheese. Now I'm using sheep feta because sheep feta and or goat feta have a much smaller protein molecule, and so it's very, very easy for our bodies to digest, as opposed to cow feta, which has a huge protein molecule, and our bodies find that very, very hard to digest. So I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of the feta on the top. Now the feta gives it just a little bit of a tang and a little bit of an extra salty flavor without being over the top. So here is our roasted butternut squash, quinoa, asparagus, walnut salad. It's everything that your gut would love. It's one of my favorite salads that I've ever made. And so I hope you remember about the solar plexus, the city of jewels, about your gut. Now, a lot of people will ask me every single day. As a matter of fact, my patients ask me, what is leaky gut? And leaky gut is when the tight junctures of the small intestine, it's only a single cell layer between what our food goes through up here and our bloodstream down here. And so when the tight junctures of the small intestine have become jeopardized by any number of things, but a big one in this day and age, believe it or not, is stress. In Chinese medicine, stress is a pathogen, just like bacteria and viruses. They really treat stress as a very important thing that you need to get rid of, or at least ease. So when this happens from antibiotics or wheat and gluten and cow dairy and stress and other medications, we have to find a way to start to heal this up. And so by eating yummy, good food at home that's high fiber, prebiotic, probiotic, and everything else, you're saying, okay, I'm worth it, and I am going to make at least one meal a day at home. And what better one than this? Well, so if you have any questions or you want to talk to me further about your gut health and what you can do to improve it, I would be glad to talk to you. I know that my email is going to be somewhere along with this video, and I would love to chat with you. So thanks, Darcy, for having me to share my famous quinoa butternut squash salad.
Yeah, this was terrific. A couple of questions are, well, I want to share with everyone, forgot to mention, on top of everything else that Candace is an expert on, she is also an acupuncturist. So when she speaks of Chinese medicine, that is why. So I had a couple questions for you. So it looks like a lot of this you can prep in advance. Is that something that people can do, or is it make it all, mix it, and then you can keep it, or can you make it things in advance?
Yep, and that's the beauty of this. I have made this. I had a friend that was not feeling very well, and so I went over to make her lunch, and I saw this, and I saw this, and I saw this, and I said, okay, I'm going to make you some quinoa, roasted butternut squash, asparagus salad, and so I had the butternut squash in the oven, I had the asparagus steaming, I had the quinoa going, and I had that whole warm salad on the table in a half an hour. So the butternut squash went in, it came out, went in with the quinoa, but you don't have to do that at all. If you do all your food prep on Sunday, but you don't want to put it together until Wednesday, great. Just seal your asparagus into a container. Same with the quinoa, the butternut squash. Every one of these things will keep. And I always suggest that when you are loving yourself up and preparing food for the week, that one of the things that goes into your oven are roasted nuts. And so if you roast some walnuts on half the sheet, and you roast some pecans on the other half of the sheet, and you say, okay, well, some of these are going to go in my quinoa butternut squash salad, and some of them are going to go over here and do something else with them. So yes, so the answer is you can prep this way in advance and just toss it together right at the last minute. And it actually gets better as it sits, and all those flavors kind of meld together. So you can even do it the day before.
Awesome. So Julia asked, is there a written recipe you could give us? Yes, we will be providing that with the replay. So you will be getting the written recipe. And then Anna says that it's not the dust that's on the quinoa, but a protective coating from birds. And I think that's just enough for you to go down a rabbit hole with.
Yeah, yes, it is. And it's easier because when you say it's the dust that hides it from the birds, and it's just easier to say it's dust. It's something like that. Yeah, nothing in nature. It's interesting. Dr. Gundry has said this and made quite a interesting following of it, is that nothing in nature really wants to be eaten. Everything that it's designed to do is to keep it from being eaten, so that the seeds can go on and generate a new generation of whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And so that's why there's protective coatings on different things, so that it can go forth and reseed. So thank you for bringing that up.
And if anybody has any other questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat. I want to talk a moment about leaky gut, and what are the signs? Because I think there are more signs, and you're like, that's leaky gut, that's leaky gut. What are the things that people may not realize, and what are the common signs of leaky gut?
Well, I was working with a younger patient yesterday, and she has been gaining weight, and for no apparent reason. And so when you're think about this, so the nutrients come across, and the good bacteria are up here. This again is our small intestine. What's supposed to happen is that those molecules go into the cellular area and get absorbed as they are passing through here into the circulation to pick up the nutrients. When this happens and those molecules are not being absorbed anywhere and actually moved into the bloodstream, you can be nutritively deficient. And so this young woman had a history of antibiotic use since young, and had other gastro issues. She has been suffering from constipation since she was 6, and now she's almost 20. And so underneath it all, what's underneath everything is this leaky gut. So one of the signs is that you might be gaining weight. Another one is that your immune system might not be as vigorous as you would like it to be. Because remember, the immune system and all the good biota sit up here in the inside of the small intestine. And if that's gone, there's actually really interesting pictures. You can find some out on the internet. And when the small intestine is intact and there's good biota, it actually looks like little pieces of white yarn laying up there. And when you see a small intestine that's been denuded or that is leaky, the villi are bald, and it just looks like a baby's bottom. There's nothing up there helping anybody. The other thing is, believe it or not, 85% of our neurotransmitters are in the biota. Again, 85%. They're not up here, they're in here. And so when someone has noticed that their depression, their anxiety, feelings of being blue have been escalating, first thing that I always do is check for leaky gut. Because if this isn't together and those signals aren't going up and triggering the serotonin and dopamine, of course you're not going to feel as good. And so then you take that into the last 2 years. Holy cow, who hasn't been stressed? And then you think, who has really been eating like a great diet? Because we get stressed, and what do? We eat comfort foods that make us feel good. Now, the other thing is that, of course, when the food goes across the villi, it signals the body that everything is happy. And again, those neurotransmitters go up to the brain. But what also happens is that when you have that fibrous food, then you have a more complete voiding, and it's not the issues of constipation and or loose stools isn't such an issue. Believe it or not, another one is, I'm gonna use the fancy word, hypercholesteremia, or high cholesterol. Because again, if this is wide open, everything is not being broken down like it should be. And when the fats get into the bloodstream without being broken down, it registers as high cholesterol. So there are so many implications of different things in our system that up until recently, we haven't really put together. There's a book that came out a couple years ago, and it was actually called the Psychobiotics. And there is a distinct correlation between our mood and our gut and whether it's healthy or not. So we've got potential of weight gain, of course, gastro issues, depression, high cholesterol. That can go into heart issues. It can go into high elevated glucose levels. So everything, almost everything can be tied back to leaky gut. One of my favorite subjects.
I know. So what are, like, if somebody wanted to get started, what would you say to somebody in the elevator? Hey, mister, you should do this, this, and this. What would you say?
Okay. So again, same patient yesterday. She was really giving me like frowning, not too happy looks. But one of the big things, one of the big foods that is a huge irritant and creates an inflammatory response is wheat/gluten. And people say, well, I only eat organic. It still has the potential of causing inflammation in your system for a number of reasons. And you can go back through the history of wheat and where our wheat, and there's a difference. Our wheat, the way it is, was actually hybridized, not GMO'd, but hybridized in the 60s, 70s, and created these huge the gluten protein inside the wheat. And, you know, it was going to feed the world. And unfortunately, they didn't test it on humans, but then that is the grain that took off across America. So if I was going to say one thing, one food to start with, it's always wheat/gluten. And you say, well, wait, aren't those interchangeable? Not necessarily, because there's some sprouted wheat breads that they say that the gluten is actually sprouted. But when you're talking about the inflammatory response, it's the whole wheat. And so that's number one on my list, always. I can go on, of course, but I want everybody to like, okay, one thing that you can do, one thing that you can do this month. And then at the end of the month, say, how do I feel?
So
And
my
I can guarantee you-
question
go ahead.
on gluten then is, as I know this does come up, can you just do less of it, or are you wanting eliminate altogether for say a month and then see how you're doing?
Well, the beautiful thing about this leaky gut is that the cells of the gut will, if the antagonists are taken out of the picture, will actually start to heal in as little as 4 days. So if you give yourself a month to 6 weeks and you take out the aggravating foods, everything starts to heal up, the bluebirds start to sing, everything starts to feel a little bit better. And then every now and then you can dip your toes back into the water of whatever your the one is. For that amount of time, though, I suggest that you just stop it, because they call it 1 dose of wheat can cause inflammation in your body for up to 6 weeks. So that's 1 slice of bread. And so when you think about what people eat, and they eat muffins for breakfast and they eat a sandwich for lunch, and then they go out and dip Italian bread in olive oil for dinner, and they do that a couple of times a week, it's a compound effect. And so it is going to catch up with their guts. So I do suggest, if it's going to be one thing, make it the gluten and make it for 6 weeks.
I love that. Thank you. I had one other question about sauerkraut, and I know you have specific rules about about sauerkraut. Can you share that? And then if we don't have any more questions, then we'll wrap up.
Sure. There are 2 different types of sauerkraut. There's pickled sauerkraut. And so if you read the label and it says that there's vinegar in there, that is pickled sauerkraut. If you get fermented sauerkraut, most of the time it's in the refrigerated section of the store, because it doesn't have the pickles in it, the pickling idea, so that it can age and be stored. It actually is fermented, and that means that the cabbage has created its own biota. And so this is a fermented food that is so good for your remember our little happy villages and those prebiotics and everything. This is another way to restore the biota in the gut. And so, yes, sauerkraut is wonderful. It's interesting that all the other cultures in the world, they have sauerkraut, they have kimchi, they have pickled vegetables, the daikon pickled, or excuse me, fermented. And so everybody has these fermented foods except for us. So I love sauerkraut, and you don't need that much. You just need maybe, less than a handful, but like a tablespoonful as a accompaniment to your meal.
And I've learned to love sauerkraut, and I appreciate the explanation about you want fermented. Think that we could go completely wrong and not be doing what we think we're doing.
Right.
Well,
that's why it's so important.
This has been fantastic. Thank you so much. And again, we will provide the recipe with the replay. And we will also provide contact information for Candace if you're wanting some more support around your gut health and health in general, or if you have any questions for her. She's always got an answer. So thank you so much, Candace, and thank you everyone who joined us live.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.